Hello, we're looking now at Lennie in section 3, and we're going to look at some of the quotations for him. So the first thing we find out about him is that Slim says, "I've never seen such a strong guy," again affirming his strength, and the fact that he's never seen it, obviously, in all his years of doing this job, is obviously shows again exactly how strong he is. Slim also says of Lennie, "A guy don't need no sense to be a nice fella," and that's really interesting because obviously Slim is the lawgiver, and Slim is obviously kind of the character assessor on the ranch. So again, it just shows and reassures the audience that every intention of Lennie's is actually kind of positive and relaxed. George actually then tells us about some of the trouble that Lennie has got into before, and this is obviously referring to weed. He said, well, he saw a girl in a red dress and he just wants to touch everything he likes. Now, we know this is trouble for two reasons. First of all, we know that what he's touched so far, he's killed, obviously, in the mouse, and he's going to do that with the pup as well. But moreover, he is tempted by a girl in a red dress, and that's what he wanted to touch. And obviously, we know that Curly's wife has already come in red. So obviously, the red there being alluring and obviously provocative and dangerous. We also get told by George that when Lennie's scared, he kind of freezes up and he can't really be kind of accessed or talked to or spoken to, and so he was so scared he wouldn't actually let go of the girl until I think George has to hit him over the head with a piece of a picket fence. And we see this again in the way he actually deals with Curly in a little while. He kind of goes into a blind rage. So again, just the danger that's around him and the strength that's around him is being emphasized. When he's got the pup and George comes and gets it from him, he actually says, "I didn't mean no harm, George. Honest, I didn't." Again, it's just kind of reaffirming, his soft side and his soft nature. It's really interesting we can draw a comparison here because Candy says about his dog, "I've been around the dog so much I've never really noticed how much he stinks." And that you could kind of echo that into George and Lennie. So George has been around Lennie so much he doesn't really ever kind of pay attention to exactly how much he could get him into trouble. Obviously he's taken it to a certain degree, but perhaps he should have known that something like this would always happen, and try and avoid it somehow. But anyway, there's an echo in there somewhere if you want to try and link it. Again, looking at Lennie and obviously his soft nature, he says, "I don't want no fights," said Lennie when he's actually being warned by George. And obviously this is kind of reiteration, again, just showing his soft side. George tells him about someone else and the trouble he's got into, and again, this is a signpost for us because it says that someone they knew called Andy is in prison right now on account of a tar. So obviously women lead to trouble is the message that is being given here. And obviously Steinbeck's making a comment on women in general in this society and time. They don't really have a place, and obviously they can cause a lot of friction and trouble in this time. His love of the dream, and he actually asks George obviously to tell about the place, and it's really interesting. He's got the catchphrase, "We could live off the fat of the land," and it's really important that he says it softly because again it kind of emphasizes the dreaminess of the way he says it. It's like a whisper, like something sacred, a sacred whisper almostly. And then we see this kind of anger come out of him when he actually talks about cats who could actually on the farm get the rabbits. He says, "You just let them try, I'll break their goddamn necks, I'll smash." So we see actually there is this kind of like violence drink, and obviously it's not actually to kind of repaint Lennie into some kind of violent creature, but it's just to show us kind of what he'll be capable of if and when he wants to be. We've got Candy speaking when they're actually both talking about the dream, etc., and that's really important because they both act as if they've done something reprehensible. So it kind of shows us that though it's not really something that should be talked about, it's just a pipe dream. It shouldn't really become a reality, and maybe they'd be talking about it in too much detail. So that's really interesting, just showing the kind of detention and the secrecy that they have around them for things like this at the time. When they're both looking at how much they're actually looking forward to the dream and obviously excited by it, they fall into a silence. It descends over them and they look at one another amazed, and they can't really believe it's coming true, and that's all really important because it's just kind of a real nada for them. It's a real high point. This is the realization of something special. It's going to go well from them from here on in, and obviously Lennie is delighted at it. And it's also really important because maybe this is kind of like the point where Lennie shows again some of his disability in that he can't kind of switch off and adapt to social situations quickly. So here, even though they've been really excited, when Curly comes in and is tense, they should actually, anyone else would kind of try and hide their feelings, whereas Lennie just he's still smiling with delight at the memory of the ranch. And then when Curly comes over to him again. We just see his simple innocence. He doesn't know what's going on, and then George speaks to him like a dog and says, "Get him, Lennie, attack him." And obviously that kind of shows obviously his animalistic qualities. When he does grab Curly's hand, it's really interesting that he leaves Curly flopping like a fish, and obviously the simile there is actually quite striking, really bringing home how helpless Curly is in front of Lennie. And after he's obviously dispatched, quote unquote, of Curly, Lennie smiles with bruised teeth, and then he's quite proud of himself. He says, he just smiles because George had told him, you've only just done what I've just told you to do. And actually he's really happy, not obviously because he's feeling any pain or anything, but just because George is pleased with him. He just says, I follow George, and he's really proud of himself. So it kind of shows the relationship he actually has with George, and how close how happy he is with himself when he pleases George, again showing how subservient to George he is. And then as he's walking out, he just wants to make sure and then echo it, and he says, "George, can I still tend the rabbits?" Even after this kind of incident where he's got himself cut up and Curly's got cut up, and obviously George kind of just says, "Yeah, of course, just get the hell on out of here." But it shows again how important the rabbits are to him. And although there's a huge deal made about the rabbits in terms of what they mean as a device of kind of softness and I don't want to say intimacy, but closeness and affection, it's also really important because the amount that he actually stresses them shows how much they're on his mind. So when we get to the end and we see that huge giant rabbit come up, which a lot of people have just said is a bit weird and just kind of a bit out there, well, it's not really, because obviously it's just such an important figure to him. It's kind of being echoed that the amount of times that he's thought about rabbits, concentrating on rabbits, had rabbits at the forefront of his mind. It's just the full realization of that. The thing that he wants most is having a go at him. So it's really important that he's always mentioning rabbits.